Hello everyone, welcome to Fantasy Showdown presented by Farmers Insurance. I'm your host Alan Cavana, and this is a huge week for the show because we are about to start our Chase playoff, and we have the two best players in our league right here to help you out with all your fantasy advice. Yeah, a little bit of a face-off. We have Nationwide Series driver Paulie Haraka and NASCAR numbers man, the Lord of Loop Data, Mike Ford. How are you guys doing?
I'm good. Ready for the chase.
Doing great. This is the best part of the year.
There you go. These are the two top seeds in our league. Let's show you how we got there. First, the results from Richmond. David Caravello, who hasn't done much this year, he ends up getting the final win at Richmond. So good momentum for the chase. Marty Snyder in second. Paulie in fourth. Where do we have Mike Ford in seventh? And I think one of the first times this year I finished last. So not much momentum heading into the playoff. Just call me Jimmy Johnson because I'm going to do well. Don't worry. That sets off the regular season points, which Marty Snyder won, but that and a dollar will get him a cup of coffee because we now go to the chase points. And with that, we have Paulie Haraka and Mike Ford tied with 5 wins on the season. I'm right there in third, and poor Marty Snyder drops all the way down to 6. But what this proves is everyone is back in it. And in your league, you are back in it because all those points reset. Now we're just at the bonus points from the regular season. So let's do this.
Can I first just say that this is really cool. This is the only fantasy game that does that. NASCAR.com Fantasy Live. I know you're all playing it because you're watching us, but seriously, this is really cool. No other game in all of fantasy NASCAR does that. So that's awesome.
And guess what? The advice you're about to give is as important as ever now. So let's get right to it. We're headed to Chicago. We make our picks every week. Paulie Haraka, we're going to start with you. Who is your fantasy stud for Chicago? You got to have him on your team if you want to win a championship.
You got to have him. So I asked my pit right ball, and I shook it, and I looked, and like a little hand came out and just slapped me and said, "What are you, nuts? You have to take Mr. Chase, Mr. Mile and a Half, and Mr. Chicago, Jimmy Johnson." In 11 starts at Chicago, Jimmy has 9 top 10s. This race last year, he led 172 laps en route to a second-place finish. He is without question Mr. Consistency, Mr. Stud, Mr. Chicago. He is my fantasy stud.
He has his numbers, ways of picking. So do you. Loop Data. Who are you going to pick? Your fantasy stud.
Before I give you my pick, do you know how many wins Jimmy Johnson has in Chicago?
Maybe 1.
0.
None.
He has 0 wins. It's one of 5
Okay.
tracks
Bringing it.
that Jimmy Johnson does not have a win. He's not going to be Mr. Chicago, and that's going to be Casey King. It's going to be Mr. Chicago. Casey King coming in as the wild card. He's outstanding at these mile and a half tracks. 3 of his last 4 races at Chicagoland were top 10 finishes. Last year finished 3rd, 121.2 driver rating. Love Casey King. I think he's going to be the dark horse pick for the championship this year. I'm not saying he's going to win it, but I think he's going to be in contention going down to Homestead.
Picking him in fantasy, picking him for the championship. Let's make some more picks. Now we're going to the fantasy dud. Not necessarily a bad driver, but one who's maybe too expensive and, like Mike knows the stats, maybe not going to get you that win or that top 10 at Chicago. Who is it?
Okay, Joey Logano is going to be my my dud pick this week. This is going to be his first chase. This is a whole different ball game. At Chicagoland, he was good last year, but prior to that, he had average running positions of 21st, 19th, and 18th. So he's going to be I think he's going to be running around the top 15 for a chase guy. I think you just want to sit him this weekend. Don't go Joey Logano at Chicago.
Interesting, because Joey Logano not that expensive and he's been running well. So tell us, who is your fantasy dud? Who are you staying away from?
My fantasy dud is Greg Biffle. Chicago has just never been his place. In his 10 races there, he's only finished in the top 10 once. He hasn't led a lap at Chicago since 2008, which was his only top 10. And in the last 4 races at Chicago, he has 3 finishes of worse than 25th. So if there's a chaser I am steering clear of, it's Greg Biffle. Way too expensive, no results.
Everyone making chase picks right now. So we've gone fantasy studs, duds. Now we go what we're called the Farmers Insurance Plan to Perform pick. This is a value pick. It's a budget. You have a budget for your fantasy team, and you want to get that driver who's not going to cost you a lot, but may get you that top 10, lead you some laps. So, Paulie, we'll start with you. Who is your Farmers Insurance Plan to Perform pick for Chicago?
When our producer emailed us on Monday morning and asked us for our picks, before the penalties were even announced, I said I had to pick Ryan Newman. I had to have him, and it's really simple. Here's why. When I watched that 39 team at Richmond, Ryan Newman had a singular focus. He was going to do whatever it took to win that race. Since Ryan Newman has been at Stewart-Haas Racing, he's got 3 top 10s there. I think you should watch first practice. If that team unloads and is fast, that means they've got the same focus they had at the end of the race at Richmond, and Ryan Newman should be without a doubt your Plan to Perform pick.
Mike, based just on enthusiasm, I want to pick Ryan Newman. I want to pick him right now. So,
It's like he just got in the chase.
so tell us, who is your plan to perform pick?
All right, this is going to be very risky. On the flip side, I'm going to go with Brian Vickers. He's never finished worse than 14th at Chicago. 3 top 10s here and driver ratings over 100 in 3 of his last 5 Chicagoland starts. So a lot of good stats for Brian Vickers. I think it's going to be a big flyer, a little bit risky, but I think it's high risk, high reward for Brian Vickers.
Well, there you have it. These two guys are our leaders now after Homestead. I'll be the leader. So, and there we go. So, you take their advice. It's obviously successful for them. You can always go to NASCAR.com/fantasy for all the stats and advice you need. So, for Mike Ford, for Paulie Haraka, make sure you set that lineup because you got to get off to a good start. I'm Alan Cavana. Thank you for watching the Fantasy Showdown presented by Farmers Insurance. Have a great week.